Hi, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and this is a little laptop, or maybe more of a palm top. You can see how small it is. It's a little computer that basically is small enough to slide into a jeans pocket or maybe a suit jacket pocket or something. And so, not surprisingly, it's called the Pocket, or rather, this is the GPD Pocket 2. It's a second generation device from the folks who brought us the Pocket 1 or the original Pocket in 2017, and it's going up for pre-order via an Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign for about $529 and up. Should have a retail price of about $729 and up. It's an upgrade over the original in a lot of ways. It has improved keyboard layout, it has a much faster processor, and it's a little bit of a sleeker, slimmer design. So you can see here that it's looks a little thinner than it is, maybe. The sides sort of taper up here towards the front and towards the edges. So it looks, like it's very much thinner at the front than it is in the back. That's not entirely true, but it's still thinner than the original at about 0.55 inches thick. It weighs about 1.2 pounds or so. It's got ports on both sides. We've got USB Type A and USB Type C port, which is used for charging, supports relatively fast charging, as well as for video output and data. We've got a microphone here, USB, micro SD, and a headset jack. And on the bottom, there's a vent for the fan, which is relatively noisy, but you can actually silence it optionally if you want to, if you don't care too much about performance. And there's also sort of a ventilation, or maybe it's the speakers actually, hidden behind the hinge here. Speaking of the hinge, you can open it to about 180-degree angle. It doesn't tilt all the way back. It's not a tablet, but it is a touchscreen device. So you can sort of hold it in your hands this way if that's something that you find comfortable. And because it's so light, it's really not a bad way to get a couple of things done. So you can hold it up when watching videos or reading or whatnot, or you can place it on a table like we've got here, or put it on your lap. I mentioned charging. It does come with this little USB Type-C charger, which is sort of the size of something that you would expect from a smartphone as opposed to for a laptop computer. And like I said, you can put it on your lap, but it's really kind of more of a palm top sized computer. So it's got a Core M3 7Y30 processor, which is the biggest upgrade, I think, over the first generation model. It's going to be available with 4 gigs or 8 gigs of RAM. This is the 8 gig version, which sells for about $50 more. It has 128 gigabytes of solid state storage, or rather of flash storage. It's solid state, but it's not as fast as what we consider an SSD normally. It's eMMC 5.0 storage. Could be worse, but it's sort of the kind of thing that you might expect from a smartphone instead of from a high-end PC. It has a keyboard which is very much improved over the first generation in terms of layout and some other things here, but it's still a little bit on the small side. So it's a cool little device that's capable of running just about any application that you could throw at it for the most part. It's running full Windows 10 software, and it has the same processor as an entry-level Microsoft Surface Pro tablet, for instance. But it comes with a keyboard. It's not detachable, and the keyboard is, as you can see, pretty tiny. So there are some sacrifices that GPD had to make to fit all the keys on here. In the first generation model, some of the keys were really half size, sort of like this question mark one. There aren't many of those. Most of these keys are uniform in size, but the spacebar is a little bit on the small side, which means that sometimes when I'm typing, I hit colon or quotation marks when I mean to be hitting the spacebar. The more you use it, the more you sort of get used to it and don't make those sorts of mistakes. Another weird thing is that the F11 and F12 keys are above the F9 and F10. And this row of keys up here with the delete and escape and so forth is a little bit on the small side. It's half height. But those are keys you're probably not going to use as often. But the layout of some of these things might take a little bit of getting used to. I should also point out that this is a prototype, so a few of these are mislabeled. This is actually the tab key. This is actually the tilde key. But that should be fixed by the time these ship to customers. Up here above this, you'll notice we've got power, brightness, volume, and a fan button. I mentioned that you can turn off the fan, and now you won't hear any noise coming from the fan. If the computer gets warm, it will probably throttle the CPU, so performance might suffer, but for certain activities where you don't necessarily need the fastest processing speeds, turning off the fan does allow for a silent operation. You can mute or adjust the volume by pressing these buttons. The volume button, or the brightness buttons, I've noticed you have to actually press and hold. You can't just tap and expect anything to happen, but they work just fine. And Over here to the right and left is something a little bit unusual, which is in the first generation, part of the reason that we had some of the cramped keys was there was a little optical touch sensor right here. There's not room for a full-size touchpad, so instead there was this little touch, actually it wasn't an optical, it was a pointing stick, sort of like you would get on a Lenovo system. Now we've got an optical touch sensor that's up here instead, and the left and right buttons are over here. It was a little bit of an afterthought. GPD had originally planned to ship this device as touchscreen only, and I generally find that using the touchscreen is a little bit easier. But you can get sort of precise touch input here. You can launch applications by maybe tapping on the sensor. And you can right-click by pressing over here, or left-click over here. So for certain things where, it might be hard to hit the right part of the screen, you accidentally close something instead of hitting the URL bar. For instance, I hit bookmarks. It might be a little bit easier to use the touch sensor. It's not quite as precise, I find, as the sensor on the One Mix Yoga. I prefer that one. And the fact that the buttons are all the way over here on the left and right means that you're probably going to wind up having to use two hands for the most part, because otherwise you're going to do move the cursor and then use the sensor, or click the button, move the cursor, then click the button. So it's sort of a two-handed kind of thing here. If I wanted to say, create a folder. So it's a little bit tedious. Of course, you can just plug in a USB mouse or connect a Bluetooth mouse if you'd prefer to do that. Just to show you an example here of something that you can run, I'm going to load a game and show you that the mouse button makes it a little bit difficult to play. But the game itself runs just fine. So this is Next Up Hero. It was a game that I got for free when Twitch was giving away some free games. While that's loading, I'll tell you we've got a 1920 by 1200 pixel display. Looks pretty good from most angles. You can see it is a glossy touchscreen display though, so it does reflect a little bit of glare. I should also point out that there is no webcam on here. So if you wanted to use it for video calling or recording Twitch streams or YouTube videos or whatnot, you're going to need to plug in an external camera. Given how bad cameras tend to be on laptops, it's probably not something that you're really going to miss, but it's definitely something you should be aware of. There is no built-in camera. I don't know if you can hear it, but the fan has sort of kicked into high gear here. Alright, so on this game, I'm going to show you that you can play it, and it's relatively fast and it looks fine, but you're using the WASD keys, and then you would use the mouse to control some things here. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and mute it. So we can move, but then if I wanted to change my angle, I'd have to use the mouse. And if I wanted to attack, I'd have to click over here. I'm not facing the right way. So it's really not ideal for this sort of activity where you're not going to necessarily be facing where you want to be facing and so forth. So if you really cared about the sort of precise input, you might be better off using the touchscreen option or plugging in external controls. Now this is a device that's not really designed specifically for gaming. It's capable of playing games, but I think that sort of point and click style games might work better on this particular style of device. Okay, exiting out of here is going to be a little tricky. Overall, I mean, I really like this little computer. I find that it's perfectly capable of multitasking. It offers pretty decent performance. I've done a video comparing it to the One Mix Yoga, which has a much slower processor, and it transcodes videos much, much more quickly. Speaking of videos, speaking of multitasking, let's just launch a couple of things here. load LibreOffice Writer. Put that in a window over here. Meanwhile, I've closed a window that I meant to keep open. Let's go ahead and load up a video just to show you a little bit of multitasking. So we're going to play a video in this window while writing a document in this one. This is definitely one of those situations where I'm realizing that the screen is kind of hard to see. So let's just go ahead and increase the font. I could also probably zoom in, but the windows and everything look fine. It's just that the content looks small. So you can see it's a little sort of tricky to type. I can normally type at around 100 words a minute on this screen, probably a little bit less, but I can run, all sorts of different applications. I can do full screen, I can watch Netflix videos, I can play games, I can do anything that I would do with a regular PC. Another thing that I discovered is that it is capable of running alternate operating systems as well. So for instance, if I wanted to plug in USB flash drive and reboot into Ubuntu, I can do that. Now, there's probably some sort of special key combination that'll let you do that, but I found the easiest way to get into it without figuring out what that key combo is, because again, I've only had this for a few days, is to just go into the Windows Advanced options here. Although, it's being a little weird here. Normally it shows me more options than I'm seeing. So we might have to do this a second time. So that was the UEFI shell. I'm not really sure how to use that to boot into Ubuntu, but we'll give this one more try. You can find more details at liliputing.com, including pictures of what this looks like when it's running Ubuntu off of this USB flash drive. There are some things that I know people were really hoping would be in a second generation device from GPD, including a backlit keyboard. This does not have a backlit keyboard. Including a 360-degree hinge so you could use it like a tablet. This does not have that functionality. I keep hitting the wrong thing. Restart. Is it what I want? We're going to go to Advanced Startup, and it doesn't support pen input. So we've got this, sort of pressure-sensitive pen here that, here we go, works with the One Mix Yoga, does not work with this device. You could use a capacitive stylus if you want a more precise input. Again, you could plug in a game controller or a USB mouse or a Bluetooth mouse if you want a more precise input than you get from the optical touch sensor. But overall, I think the keyboard is relatively nice. I think the performance is relatively decent. And it's a device that, with a price of over $500 is not probably going to replace your laptop for most people, but it really is small enough that you can slide it into a pocket and take it with you anywhere you go, or put it into a bag and barely notice that it's there, weighing just over a pound, really. It's capable of running Ubuntu as well as Windows. It's something that you could use to do a little coding on the go, take a couple of notes, get all sorts of different things done. It's kind of everything that I was hoping little computers would be 10 years ago when I started the website called Liliputing about Lilipution computers. That said, these days I tend to like a larger screen, so if you could give me a 2-pound notebook with a bigger screen and a full-size keyboard, I could probably get more work done on it. But it really is nice to have the option of using something like this as a secondary display. If this were a little cheaper, I think it would be a no-brainer. But at... Sorry, I'm just rotating the screen. But at $500 and up, I think it's something that's really going to appeal to enthusiasts. I know there are some out there, though, so I know people have been really looking for this sort of device. What I just did there is, out of the box, the screen is rotated. That's sort of the one big issue that you have here with Ubuntu. Also, scaling is set to 100%, so you might need to change that. Right now, everything looks pretty tiny, and using your fingers kind of difficult because it's going to be hard to grasp the things that you're trying to get at. But the touchscreen or touchpad works, and I can connect to wireless select a network, and get online in Ubuntu. And once we're online, I should be able to do other things like open a web browser and surf the web. You can find the command that I used to rotate the screen at liliputing.com. It's basically XRANDR space hyphen O space right. See, again, it can be kind of hard to touch the right things there. But once you're in the right area, then the screen gets really bright, apparently. We can adjust the brightness, and it's not really touch optimized, but it works. So that's a quick look at Ubuntu running on the GPD Pocket 2. Again, this is a prototype that was sent to me by the folks at GPD for testing. It's available via Kickstarter in starting July 30th of 2018. Should be available later this year at retail. And again, it ships with Windows 10. It's a relatively capable little device. Its biggest sticking points might be that the touchpad can be, or a touch sensor can be a little bit sort of tricky to get used to. The keyboard is a little small, and the price is a little bit on the high side. But that said, given how many different things you can do with it, if you can afford the price and you're really looking for something that's super portable, not necessarily to replace a laptop, but to go places where you wouldn't normally take a laptop, I think it's a pretty cool little device. So it's the GPD Pocket 2, $529 and up, and you can find more details at liliputing.com or check out my YouTube channel at Liliputing for more details about how it compares to some of the other devices on the market, like the One Mix Yoga, which is a much slower processor, a cheaper starting price, and a 360-degree hinge, among other things, allowing you to use it as a tablet. This is Brad Linder with Liliputing and a preview of the GPD Pocket 2.